All right. Thank you everyone for joining this Acclime webinar. Today, me and my guest speakers have the honor to tell you a bit more about the attractiveness of investing and doing business in China, Indonesia, and the Vietnam markets. We have the challenge to do all of this within the hour and answer any of the questions that you may have. So let's get started and dive right in. Let me tell you a little bit about Acclime. Acclime is a regional corporate services provider based in Asia. So we say from Asia for Asia. In fact, we support many Western companies that do business in Asia. We're in right now 9 key markets in Asia. We're in about 13 cities across Asia. So we're a true regional specialist, but then with global standards. Currently, we have around 450 professionals. We're really truly in country. So we're on the ground. We don't make use of agents or the subcontractor models in the countries where we are. We're really there on the ground. We're full service as well. So we have accountants, lawyers, company secretaries, HR specialists. We serve around 4,500 clients and counting. Some of these are multinational companies. Some of them are listed. Others are SMEs or startups or entrepreneurs. That brings me to the first speaker of today, my partner, Matthew Laurie from Acclime, Vietnam. Matthew, the floor is yours for a self-introduction and some more information about Vietnam.
Thank you, Robin. So, Robin, can you maximize those slides full screen? So 2 on a page. That works. As Robin's doing that, welcome everyone, and good to be here doing this webinar. As I'm flipping through them, as background, I've been in Vietnam about 16 years and established what is the Acclime Vietnam business about 6 years ago. And my background is an Australian chartered accountant. So our office in Vietnam, we have 3 offices in Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, and in Hanoi, and around 120 staff. Okay, keep moving forward. There we go. 3 cities, 120 employees, a full range of services: market entry, advisory, accounting, tax, business compliance, HR, payroll, outsourcing. So it is very much an in-depth to help out multinational clients and regional clients at the same time. So we've got a couple of slides here. I'm not going to focus on these slides. It's not the emphasis of the presentation, and I believe we'll be sharing them after the event so people can have a look at these. What we've got here is to showing that Vietnam's been relatively stable over the years. We've got a growth pattern, which is fairly stable growth. We don't have a lot of blips. Since the early 2010s, we had a bit of inflation, but since then it's been under control. And during COVID, we've actually maintained positive growth. And as we continue through these slides, you'll see that these trends are showing us that we have good growth, and we've got particular industries and sectors which are a focus. And one of the things for the purpose of this presentation is that the exports have been a foundation of Vietnam. We've got a good trade surplus. We've got the record trade surplus this year. Exports are growing, and it's all predominantly from foreign investment. 78% of all exports are from the foreign sector, and we've got this going in mobile phones, cell phones, computers, garments, footwear, furniture. There's a wide range of manufactured goods, but it is all coming from the foreign invested sector. So we've got a growing economy. During COVID, we've kept that positive growth, and we've now got a situation where there's a great foundation to build from as we move forward. So you can look at more of those data, the economic overview later on when we share the deck. So most importantly is about foreign investors in Vietnam and how you can be foreign investors, what you can do. So the first element is this concept of business lines. So they're the approved activities of a company. If it's not approved, you can't earn revenue from those activities. And this is this is what is policed most by the authorities. And it's also the hardest for many foreign investors to comprehend is what can I and can't I do under that? So most sectors are open. Manufacturing is generally an open sector. There's no restrictions for foreign ownership of those business lines. But there are certain business lines which have restrictions. For example, tourism cannot be 100% foreign owned, can be 99, but can't be foreign. Certain sectors are 50-50 and certain sectors are just not permitted. But the bulk of sectors that foreign investors are coming in, particularly manufacturing, distribution, sales, don't have restrictions. So that allows the foreign investors to come in with 100% structures into Vietnam relatively easily in those particular elements. Moving forward. So your steps is to make sure that you actually, before you start the process, you can get going. Next slide's okay. Thanks. So the process, no, that's it. So back. That's it. So that you need to have 3 things in place before you can start a business in Vietnam. And these 3 things are the precursors to actually starting a company or starting a business, be it whatever type of business it is. You must have a legal representative who is resident in Vietnam. Doesn't matter about nationalities, they must reside in Vietnam. And COVID makes it a bit harder getting people in and out. And you can have more than one legal representative, but they must be located in Vietnam for one of those. You must have a lease or a pre-lease. So if you're going to open a factory, you must identify the factory first. If you want to open an office, a serviced office, and do a virtual office arrangement and then find a factory later, or a distribution center or an import center, you can do that later, but you must have initial permanent place of registration for the business. And you must have evidence that you have sufficient capital to contribute. There's no minimum capital for a Vietnamese company, but the capital is dependent upon the business lines and the activities you wish to undertake. So if you need to build $1 million factory, you're probably going to put down $200,000 of paid up capital, $800,000 of loans to justify the $1 million that you're going to bring in, because it needs to fit into the plan you're putting in place. There's flexibility, but you must be able to back up that you have those funds available, or the authorities won't give you the permission. And if you get those in order, you're ready to move on to the company establishment actual process. So there are 3 steps. You need to obtain what's called the IRC, the Investment Registration Certificate. You need to obtain the ERC, the Enterprise Registration Certificate, and then you must do all the post-licensing process. The IRC is like the foreign investment approval. That's the harder process to go through, is to make sure that you have, you fill in the forms, you do the whole application process, which is a lengthy process, and you get that right. If you're investing in an industrial park, they will do the IRC because they have the authority to help the foreign investor, or an export zone. If it's a regular location, an advisor like Acclime will do that for you and make sure that that project and that foreign investment approval gets approved. So then you can move on to your ERC, your Enterprise Registration Certificate, and that's your Certificate of Incorporation. All companies have an ERC, only foreign companies have an IRC. And then you do the post-registration activities. It's a 6 to 8 week process. That said, if it's in a sector that's got restrictions or a sector that needs review, so if you're trying to do something that has a particular element to it out of the ordinary, this may be lengthened. And if you need ministerial approval, it could be a 6 or 12-month process. The vast majority are the 6 to 8 weeks. So get your documents in order at the start, find your lease, find your property, find your legal representative, move forward. It is possible to be up and running in around 6 to 8 weeks to have the company established and all up and running. Now, there's a couple of parts about this which is quite interesting from a capital perspective. So the IRC allows you what's called a direct capital bank account, or a direct investment capital bank account. That is important because an ERC only allows you operating accounts. Very easy to get operating bank accounts, your current accounts. Only foreign investors have this direct investment. And this is important as we move to the next slide, because from a treasury perspective, that it's very hard to send funds outside Vietnam unless you have a service contract or a purchase or something you can show that it's legitimate, or that you're repatriating dividends, profits, loans using your direct capital account. So the direct capital account allows you to send money in and out, and as a foreign investor, that's your protection. That means that you don't have trapped capital and that you can pay the money out. So on the next slide, you'll see that you've got the direct capital account is a foreign border control. You've got your funds, you can bring your capital in and take your capital out if you sell the business. You can bring your loans in and out through that capital account fairly well unrestricted. There are some registrations for longer term. and your dividends come out. And if you're owned by a corporate shareholder, there's no withholding tax on dividends. There is a 5% withholding tax on interest, but nothing else on the loans. And foreign capital, only you pay capital gains tax on the gains and any transfers. But that allows a foreign investor to have confidence of enter the market, start their business and get their capital out and bring it in and out with relatively few restrictions. And so that's just the basic structure. And it isn't as hard as it sounds to set up and run a business. Commercially, it's not necessarily easy, but structurally, it's not that hard for most businesses. Taxation is always an important understanding to how does that affect. So Vietnam, here we have full size. Vietnam has a effective 20% standard CIT rate for most industries. There are some reductions available for certain sectors or certain locations. You can get some tax frees in certain industrial zones or certain mountainous areas or certain subsectors. But if you worked on 20%, that is the most common, and that applies to the vast majority of corporate taxpayers. As a 10% value added tax across the board domestically, there's a few adjustments to that, but 10% is pretty much the standard everywhere. And those are the two taxes. Individual, it does go from 0 to 35%. There is a portion that is tax-free at the front end. There's further reductions for dependents, and that applies to residents. It's not about nationality, it's about residency. So the tax resident is a worldwide taxation for tax residents, Vietnamese or foreign, and otherwise, if you go to the next slide, non-resident individuals have a 20% tax rate. So someone who's in and out of country and it not in Vietnam, more than 183 days a year, they will be taxed at 20%. If they're more than 183 days, they're taxed as a tax resident. It does have an issue for US where there's no double tax agreement, but Vietnam has double tax agreements with about 75 countries. It has double tax agreements with China, Hong Kong, with most countries. There is a draft with the US, but it was never ratified, and that does present double tax issues potentially with US individuals, but it gives a nice template for dealing with other countries and corporate matters. The good thing is that most withholding taxes and taxes are lower by default than what's in the double tax agreement, which makes it relatively easy to do tax planning from Vietnam. And after that, in about 11 minutes, I've done the presentation, and Robin, you were concerned we weren't going to get through. So that'll leave lots of room for questions at the end. I'm happy to take questions as they arise, and I'll pass back to Robin.
Well done, thank you, Matthew. That was indeed at full speed. Please allow me to welcome Vinod, my partner in Acclime Indonesia. Vinod, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robin, and thanks, Matt, for that presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that? There we are. So Indonesia, investment and the impact of the omnibus law. So we've got something specific in Indonesia coming up this year. Well, actually going to be early next year because it's just been approved by the parliament. So we'd like to take you through that. But before that, a bit of shameless promotion of Acclime Indonesia, like my partners. Acclime from Asia, for Asia. We've got about 40 employees in Indonesia. And like Matt, we do legal and corporate secretarial, payroll, and HR, accounting services, and CFO support and tax compliance. So your bread and butter for Indonesia. Now, a bit of context. As you can see from this very colorful chart, China, which is obviously represented by Robin today. Vietnam, we can see a small portion of that, maybe on the bottom side of this chart. And of course, Indonesia, being the fourth most populous country in this world, has a special place for us on the top. So a bit of context there in terms of macroeconomics. In terms of the area itself, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, by far the largest country. We've got about 600 million people in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, approximately 40 to 45% of the population. So that's quite sizable. Just to set the context once again. In terms of GDP growth in ASEAN countries from 2015 to 2019, the past 4 years, we've been significantly recording a good growth rate year on year. It's about 5 to 5.5%, except for this year, obviously, a black swan year for us, for all of us. But Indonesia, more importantly, is the only member of the $1 trillion $1 trillion club in the region, and is poised to grow further. Now, where is all this money coming from, and where is it going to in ASEAN? So, well, Matt very nicely mentioned that Vietnam is quite a big recipient of this FDI inflows. Indonesia is also there, as you can see from the bottom, third from bottom, slightly over 20 billion worth of FDI inflow in 2019. But Singapore, obviously, being the biggest country, but that's maybe not very true intrinsically, because obviously they tend to be the penultimate flow of funds into Singapore before distribution into the rest of ASEAN. So we have to take it with a pinch of salt slightly. Now, FDI realization in Indonesia, as I mentioned just now, based on country of origin, it's coming in from Singapore, by far the largest flow of funds into Indonesia, 28.8% in 2019, and Hong Kong being the other culprit, the usual suspect, shall we say, the financial hubs of Asia for the flow of funds into Indonesia. And that's simply because we meaning Indonesia has a good double tax treaty with these two countries in terms of flow of dividends and other payments from a withholding tax perspective, royalties and management fees and so forth. The other sort of inflows are coming from China, Japan and South Korea, and a sizable others at 20.1%. So those are where the monies are coming from. Where the money's going to once they get into Indonesia, manufacturing being the largest recipient of that by far, and then of course your mining and your construction infrastructure in accordance with the government plan. Now this slide has been taken from McKinsey, and I've credited them for that at the bottom, of course. So in the next 5 years, what's going to happen by sector in Indonesia? So we're projected to grow by $121 billion for the next 5 years. And that's going to be coming from mostly manufacturing, not surprising. We have manufacturing zones throughout the country. Retail, not surprising as well, because we have a fairly young population and very hungry for consumption, both from a digital perspective as well as your bricks and mortar, and transport and infrastructure being the next one. The digital revolution has arrived in Indonesia well and truly. So mobile internet penetration was one of the highest in the world, 73%. Cloud technology, Internet of Things, big data and advanced analytics all have at least gone up exponentially over the past few years. And where is this digital revolution being implemented? E-commerce, we have very big unicorns here in the form of Shopee, Lazada, transport and food in the form of Gojek and Grab. They're all unicorns, and online travel, Traveloka is also unicorn. So these are the sectors in which 5 leading internet sectors in Indonesia in which the money is going to, and 2 nascent sectors for health tech and education tech. So obviously with the onset of COVID-19, people can't go to school anymore, can't go to university, so digitalization has happened there. So that's a product of the year. Now, a bit of a SWOT for Indonesia. We've got your opportunities, as we mentioned, stable economic growth, a large labor force, about 200 million people, very young labor force as well. So for working class citizens, so it's good there from a sense of from a productivity sense. And then rising growth of urban areas, Jakarta, Medan, Bandung, and Surabaya. Those are the areas where a lot of growth is happening. And of course, we already talked about the internet and mobile subscribers and penetration. And like any developing country, the challenges we face in Indonesia is the regulatory environment, the labor policies, and the bureaucratic inefficiencies, which leads us very nicely into the new law which was passed by the government on the 5th of October 2020, exactly to address some of the challenges foreign investors are facing. The omnibus law. Now, the full name of this law is the Omnibus Law for Job Creation. So the idea of this law is to create jobs for Indonesians and to boost productivity and production. So, but is it a breakthrough or a new problem? Now we can see from this pie chart that improving investment and improving investment ecosystem and business activity by far is 80 laws, different types of law which has been changed to accommodate that for the improving of the investment climate. So that's by far the area of focus for the government. And what does this mean from a key points perspective? So it's going to make things easier for foreign investment to come into the country by way of revocation of building permits, a new business license regime of which we don't know what exactly the details are going to be. That's going to be known in the first, hopefully the first couple of months of next year. But it's going to be a risk-based system, depending on the industry. The investment relaxation, I think this point 3 here is probably going to be the most far-reaching and most effective in terms of bringing foreign funds into the country. Because what we have right now is a negative list, and almost all industries of strategic nature, including your oil and gas, your shipping, retail to a certain extent, are included in this negative list, which curtails foreign equity participation directly. So it's expected to be replaced by a positive list, the details of which we are awaiting with intent. Labor reform, easy to hire, difficult to fire, is always the term used by our foreign clients coming into the country. Severance pay, foreign workers, outsourcing, what are the types of jobs which can be outsourced and what can't be, minimum wages and so forth are being relaxed to encourage foreign equity. And of course, the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund. Now, we talked about application of the risk-based licensing. High-risk industries will be defined and you'll have your business identification number and nothing much more for, and that's only what's required for a low-risk industry. Something which is doesn't pollute the environment, something which doesn't have an impact on the social, economic nature of the country or impact on the country, and that would be only limited to your business identification number and no other permits are required. So the idea is to simplify in various sectors, your halals, your fishing, your agriculture, and so forth. But the most important thing here, it is going to hopefully, now we're still waiting details of this. Now the omnibus law is hopefully going to make establishing an entity, a limited liability company, much easier. Obviously, it's well known that you can set up a company for $1 in Singapore, or maybe a ringgit in Malaysia, but not so in Indonesia. Current standards, current requirements is that a foreign company needs to have a minimum of $200,000, about $200,000 as paid up capital. Now, that's a big hindrance, especially for SMEs. So that's expected to be relaxed, and we are awaiting details in the first couple of months of next year, where hopefully that's going to be implemented. So, and immigration in terms of granting of visa, especially for investor visas and so forth, are going to be eased up. And of course, the intellectual property rights, the impact of that. Now, we mentioned the negative list before. The old negative list states that these items here, A to T, cannot be commercialized. And that's shortened somewhat to the chart on the right-hand side of the slide, which says that most items now from F onwards to T can be commercialized and only leaves cultivation of marijuana, gambling, casinos, and a bit more sensitive industries, which requires the written permission of the government before it's commercialized. So I think that in itself is an achievement if this law is going to be implemented properly. Now, are we going to say that all industries are going to be open 100% to foreigners and foreign equity participation? I think not. I think we have to be realistic about this. Once the implementation regulations comes on board in the first couple of months next year, I think there's going to be a huge relaxation in terms of the negative list. I think foreigners are definitely going to be allowed in much more across the board, but I think we will see some form of protectionism remain. So I think that's the crux of the matter, right? So I think I'll be happy, like Matt, to take questions at the end of the presentation, but for now, over to Robin.
Thank you, Vinod. That was extremely informative, and it does remind me a little bit of of China only a couple of years ago, I must say, in terms of opening to foreign investment and the other developments that you mentioned. Okay, let me start to share my screen. Okay, sorry for that. Thank you. Briefly about myself. I've been in China for more than 10 years. I'm partner of Acclime China. We have offices in Shanghai, in Beijing, and Shenzhen. I am also myself connected to a law firm. So on a daily basis, I advise clients on tax, accounting, and legal and compliance matters. Our services in China are full scope. A brief overview of the economy to date in 2020, which is a little bit different than the years before. In terms of export of goods, we see that China is stagnating. At least it's not growing anymore. Typically, when export would be declining, we would have more import of goods, but that's also not the case in China. So what that means is that there's a big focus on domestic consumption, and this is something very new to China. This is something that the government is also actively pushing, basically for China, as such a big economy, to be more self-sustainable. China is also pushing a lot for service industry. So if you see the growth of 10 years, and that's something that Vinod was also seeing in Indonesia, of course, media and online is taking a big step forward in China, moving from 43% to 53% of the GDP. And so the technical revolution in China is also coming its way in Asia. They have major investments in India, in Vietnam, in Indonesia when it comes to especially their applications and their payment solutions. Okay, so here you see a little bit of the new economy. So fintech, virtual reality, autonomous driving. And we see that China is either the leader, or China is catching up with what was, or what still is, the world leader, the USA. This is really being pushed. So if you're selling or producing these type of products, China would still be an interesting market. Now, been in China for 10 years, and one thing I've never had to do is to explain the attractiveness of China. So in a sense, the topic of this seminar is quite an interesting one for me, because I really had to start thinking about, well, what is attractive about China today? I used to say it's everything, but certainly that is no longer everything in China. And so historically, China was the production capital of the world. Anything you could imagine, any raw material they have here, so they can produce any product. But China has changed a bit. It's become a high quality production hub. The labor force is quite educated, but also quite expensive. So costs are overall rising. So China is no longer seen as the haven for all type of manufacturing. So we see that a lot of manufacturing is moving to other countries, either because it's specialist manufacturing or sometimes because of cost reasons. So China still has a very good infrastructure, very good logistics, which makes that a lot of companies are still producing here instead of moving to perhaps cheaper markets. More importantly, China has also popped out as a consumer capital of the world. So it was already the world's largest luxury market in 2013. It's the largest e-commerce market in 2013. Urban incomes are rising significantly. In 1-2 years from now, we think that half of the population will be middle class income. So that's 630 million people in one country that have quite some spending power. In my part of the presentation, I want to focus on 3 considerations when you as a company want to come to China. So presuming China is attractive, I go a step further and I say, well, probably it is. So what do you have to consider? Well, 1, you need to choose the right business model. 2, a question I get very often is, how can I employ staff locally in China? So there is an interest. I want to explore this market. I want to start doing things. How can I do that? What are the options there? And 3, protecting your intellectual property, which is absolutely key in the Chinese market. So let's presume you're selling products in China. The trend in China is really in China for China. So a lot of the products are produced in China. 10 years ago, 90% was exported. Right now, I think 90 to 95% of my clients are producing in China, and they're actually selling also in China. Because there's an increased demand in China for Western high quality products, both import, but also more and more it's accepted if these are just produced in China. At the same time, there's a decreasing of margins in Western countries. China is becoming very interesting. Hey, if you look at the luxury market, most prices of goods are about 30 to 40% more expensive than if you buy the same goods in the Western world. Looking at business models that you can employ to sell products here in China, either it's export or re-import. That's often for one-time deals. You have a customer, you have an agent or a distributor who wants to buy this for you, but you don't have an entity. You do it this way. If you have a couple of deals, then maybe export and re-import will be expensive because you do pay duties, import duties. So you may go for a domestic trading agent, but it's not really a business model. Business model is more finding a domestic distributor or a partner, maybe in a joint venture. Key issues are they have their own agenda and they often have leverage on you, which is something that can backfire extremely hard if you are looking 5 or 10 years down the road when you may want to actually start directly selling in China by yourself. And this in China we do with a WUFI, which is the equivalent of a limited liability company or an LTD. If you're selling services, the landscape is a little bit different, obviously. Of course, there's also an increased demand for high quality services. The wave is a bit slower than for products. I think in the last 3-4 years, Chinese companies are really looking B2B also for these high quality services, obviously B2C as well, especially in the software and IT arena. China has increased the pool of talented local staff. A lot of them have studied abroad. They're coming back, so that's no longer an issue. The business models that are available here is either you do it cross-border. So let's say you're a service company, you're based in Dubai or you're based in Paris. The issue is you have no face-to-face contact. It's not easy to have an after service because you don't have an entity or staff here. There's a cultural difference, and it's quite slow in terms of servicing your clients. And the Chinese consumers and companies are extremely demanding. So cross-border is not very often a good solution for most foreign companies investing in China. What does work is appointing a domestic reseller or finding a partner. One issue is there is a low-level service quality with a lot of local partners because they have been servicing Chinese companies maybe with Chinese type of services. So you can have high quality services, high quality software products, but you still need the in-country support, which is a bit challenging. At the same time, you're creating a competitor. If your corporation doesn't work out or they're doing extremely well, then it may be very hard for you to later go to the market directly because they may create a similar brand with similar service levels. They also have your whole sales network because they've been building it for you. They may not have been sharing it for you. At the same time, it's different cultures and it makes for a challenging marriage. So also here we see an increased direct foreign investment, foreign companies setting up their own wholly foreign-owned enterprise in China. I see an influx of SaaS providers. There is one requirement: if you want to provide these SaaS services to Chinese companies, you must host them on a local server. Well, I should stipulate that differently. You could host them on a foreign server, but because of the Chinese internet wall, either there is no connection or the connection is too slow. So this is not really a good option. So if you want to host on a local server, you require a 5-in-1 business license, which means as much as you need to set up your limited liability company. So a lot of companies, they don't have any staff here. They don't want this entity, but it's a must due to the regulations in China. So if you want to set up this company, and the reason often to do it is because you need strong partners into the country. So you need to have your staff. You need to show that you have a long-term commitment to your customer. You need to deliver everything quickly, 24-hour customer service engagement. You need to be invoicing locally in renminbi very often. You may need to buy and sell some goods, whether you're product or service oriented. You may require warehousing in China. So if you want to set up that company, I think similar to Vietnam, it takes around 3 to 4 months. No capital commitment, so no requirement. Depends on the business. Almost no restrictions. I would say most industries 100% ownership. Of course, there are some restrictions, but they're becoming less and less. And I do feel that there is a level playing field, and there's no minimum or no deadline for the capital contribution. Question I always get is, can I get my profit out of China? The answer is yes, but only one time a year. So you got to plan it very well. Okay. If you want to start in China, maybe you the first thing you want to do is find a person, a staff who can help you do this. So I distinguish as a local employment relationship or there's a service relationship. Local employment, you have two ways. One, you set up a company directly, so you need to incorporate that, or you go indirectly. You would use an employer of record or a professional employer organization, which are two of the same things. The issue is that's a service contract that is not an employment contract. So you may be circumventing dispatching restrictions. At the same time, the Chinese tax office may find that you do have a permanent establishment in China, and one way or the other, they find that they should tax you for corporate income tax, which obviously that way you're not paying. What a lot of companies do is they try to keep it simple. They start a service relationship with a Chinese independent consultant, so an individual here. The issue is, well, you still pay locally, so it's a cross-border payment, doesn't always work well. Paying the expenses of this person, that doesn't really work. It should be a lump sum. The individual should pay his own taxes, his own social insurance. He or she may not feel that there's a commitment from the company, so you may not be able to get the best people. And then again, it may also be a personal establishment. Foreigners that have a degree, a bachelor or higher, and 2 years work experience are generally eligible for a work permit. So that's just not of a key concern should you wish to send foreigners to China. That brings me to intellectual property. I think for China, that is always the most important step. So I really say this is a call to action. You have to obtain your rights locally in China. If I would get a dime for every client that says I have my IP registered, and then it turns out they have it registered in their own country, I could stop working 10 years ago already. It is a big issue. You have to file locally in China. You could do it through WIPO system, but it's very complicated. The focus for me is really on trademarks. China is really known to be a trademark squatter, trademark squatting country. It's a real business model, like the web domain names 10 or 20 years ago. So right now, individuals or company would register your trademark, they would hold it ransom, and that means you effectively can't enter the market. Your import into China may be blocked by customs. Your export from a factory may be blocked by by customs. All the platforms for online selling require you to have a trademark registration. Your distributors will require you to have a trademark registration. If someone else has a trademark registration, they could sue you for trademark infringement. So really, filing is absolutely the key here. China applies a first to file system. So if someone files before you, they will have the rights. There's no repercussions for bad faith. It's not a trademark theft. It's not a criminal offense. So it's really who comes first. There are ways to get the trademark back, but it's not very easy. A lot of times foreign companies find that their trademark is stolen. I think the most famous case is iPad. Apple forgot to register iPad many years ago. A Taiwanese company in China registered it. They didn't do very well. They had a company but no business, and they had one trademark registration, which was iPad, and they got 62 million US for it because someone at Apple forgot to register it timely. And the issue was time. They had no time to wait with launching the product because a litigation may work. We can go to court, but it may take 2 years. So instead, what goes for a lot of foreign companies, it's better to buy, because if you change the brand and you have a brand outside of China, one, you can leverage that brand, it has a reputation, and two, to change your branding, it will cost you a lot more in terms of production and marketing. One thing to mention further is that in China, most of the individuals read Chinese. They read a bit of English, but it's mainly Chinese characters. So I recommend you to start creating a Chinese brand name by yourself, and don't wait until your customers do it, because one of them may be smart and register it before you do. And then you have the same issue as with a foreign brand name. So you can read the case study. It's a real situation where we assisted our client to buy a trademark for over $2 million because it was simply too much work to rebrand, and they did not want to wait for a couple of years. They wanted to go to market already yesterday. That was it from my side. I believe we do have a Q&A session. We did receive some questions, I saw. Okay, May, could you assist me with this? Okay, so one of the questions I see here to all panelists. What are the common frustrations for foreigners when investing in Indonesia? So, Vinod, over to you.
Oh, that's a great question, but a very far-reaching one, I think, because there's quite a few frustrations. I think the typical frustration, depending on the type of client which is coming in to invest, is your probably your paid-up capital, which is, as I mentioned during the presentation, which is quite high and prohibitive in Indonesia. It's about 2.5 billion rupiah, or about 180,000 US dollars, looking at the exchange rate now. So that's a bit of a hindrance for SMEs, especially. And probably the other big hindrance, obviously, is the negative list. Quite a few of the industries are sort of closed in some way to foreign participation. Not 100% allowable. Let's say, for instance, if you want to open a shop in a mall to sell goods to Indonesians in the mall, that would be 100% closed to foreigners at the moment. So that's a bit of a hindrance there too, because the negative list is quite far-reaching at the moment, and that's hopefully going to be addressed with the omnibus law implementation. And the third one, probably it's from a labor perspective. Maybe it is so difficult to fire someone, even though you've stolen. It's quite clear that from a CCTV perspective, maybe you have an employee maybe putting his hands in the kitty and maybe stealing from the company. It's quite difficult for us to go through that process and go through the court process, and until the employee is found guilty, we have to continue paying the salary. So and it's very employee-centric from a manpower regulations perspective. And I think that is hopefully going to be balanced out slightly. There's going to be hopefully some balance between employer and employee perspectives in the omnibus law, which is going to be hopefully implemented soon. So I think those three areas could be, from my years of experience here, could be the major areas of frustration. But hopefully all of these will be things of the past come next year. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Vinod. I see another question. I think that's for all of us. What are the problems foreign investors typically face when trying to start a foreign company? Matthew, how's that in Vietnam?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues, and it's more of a general issue sort of following on from Vinod, is that assumption that logic is a practical way to do business. And Vietnamese laws aren't written around logic. There's reason behind them, but they're not necessarily a logic based. And that challenges people quite often in that they want to do something or something's not prohibited or whatever else. Why do they have to deal with a certain issue? Or why do they need documentations notarized? So every document, foreign document to be accepted in Vietnam needs to be foreign notarized at an embassy or a consulate or to make it a legal document in Vietnam. And it's those sort of things can frustrate someone. And just to start the process, once they get past the sort of fighting the system, once they get past the sort of those general frustrations of why, and just go, there's a process, follow the process, don't fight it, just follow it. It's not that imposing, and it is just one of those things where you have to change that mindset. The successful foreign investors are those who come in with an open mind, they get the advice, they follow the process and go with the flow. They get good people around them, they learn, and like both in China and Indonesia, we've got issues on termination staff is difficult, the processes, the insurances on salaries, they're all very similar issues you face. And you can either try to fight the system and argue why it's not fair, this shouldn't be, or you understand and go with the flow and get best practice. So the success is those who can really just get into the country and follow those best practices and the system and not try to fight it. So that's my sort of commentary I would put on top of that. I'm not sure, Robin, what you would say from a Chinese perspective.
Well, I think that's very similar. But the one thing that pops in mind for me is that in China, every company has a legal representative. So you must appoint one. And the question is who you're going to appoint, because it's a very, very powerful position. So a lot of companies don't want to appoint someone that they just found to manage their country. Sometimes lower management doesn't want to assume the position because it comes also with potential liability, civil, administrative, criminal. So it usually ends up to be the owner or the CEO or the CFO. And then when it comes to, well, operating, but especially starting the company, some government departments, depending on the district, depending on the city, require this person to come in person to open up the company. So companies are sometimes forced to appoint people that they don't really want to appoint because a CEO or a chairman or a founder of a company does not want to just fly to China to open up a company. So this is an issue in conversations that I have on a weekly basis, advising clients on how to deal with this and see if we have any practical solutions.
Can you have multiple
Only
legal reps in China? In Vietnam, about 5 years ago, they changed that and they allowed multiple legal reps, and so that was a game changer here. So still one.
That's very smart. China only one. Yeah.
And can you outsource that position, Robin?
I would say legally that's challenging, but to my knowledge, no service providers do that because of the liability. And so you could have an exit ban on top of the civil, administrative, and potential criminal liability. You can also be prohibited from leaving China if there's a dispute with the court, with the tax office, with the Public Security Bureau, the police. No, that service doesn't really exist in China. I think that's very different to, for example, Hong Kong or Singapore.
Right.
Yeah.
So no level of indemnity is going to cover that those risks
No, indemnity is not the issue. It's more about freedom.
That's right. Fair enough.
I see another question from Yamin. Initial investment is a barrier for a foreign company to set up in Indonesia. Let us know your advice how we can start a business in Indonesia. Vinod.
Is this a particular type of business we're looking for?
It's a very good question. Maybe Yamin can specify this.
Yeah, so basically, of course, Yamin, just to answer your question generally, waste management. Okay, so we will have to consult the negative list for waste management. Obviously, we can get back to you. Just drop us a note after this, and May can get back to you specifically. I mean, so I'll consult the negative list in terms of waste management and see whether it's 100% available for foreign equity participation, because it really depends on the type of waste management in the areas we're looking at here. But generally, yes, at the moment, if it's going to be 100% foreign owned, and if it's allowed by the negative list at the moment, so if the minimum capital is $250,000 US. Sorry, yeah, $200,000 US, 2.5 billion rupiah, and of course your authorized capital is 4 times that, which is 10 billion rupiah. So there are no workaround solutions around that. From a practical perspective, when do you have to inject that paid up capital? It's normally 60 days after the company has been established, because it's obviously a chicken and egg situation. The bank account needs to be open and so forth. But what happens when you haven't injected that paid up capital, that $200,000 US after 60 days? Is anybody going to, do you have to report that to the Ministry of Law and Human Rights? The practical answer is no. In theory, of course, we have to do that. But can you take more than 60 days to inject that paid up capital? We have seen situations that has dragged on a bit considerably at the request of the directors of the company, and that's happened before. So there's not much repercussions in terms of dragging that a bit longer. So for now, it is still that paid up capital. We'll come back to you in the next 2 months and see whether that's been relaxed slightly. So that's something to look out for, Yamin.
Okay. So I see another question. Are there any benefits in choosing where to start a company, such as city or province or export zone, for example? Matthew, how's that in Vietnam?
Yeah, so there are some. So you've got industrial parks, you have export zones, you have high-tech zones, and there are some benefits, there are some tax advantages. Export zones, if you are importing, reprocessing and exporting, you don't have to bring anything into the country, so it doesn't cross any borders, you don't have any issues with customs duties and etc. There might be slightly higher cost to enter one of those zones, but the cost benefit. Industrial zones for manufacturing is definitely encouraged. They have the infrastructure, they have the approvals, the waste management, the water management, and it's much easier to go into that path and just either build your own or take a ready built factory in an industrial zone. Some industrial zones in some provinces have tax-free periods and tax breaks, and looking around, and they're usually driven by encouraging employment, encouraging investment. So if you're in Ho Chi Minh City, which has a catchment of about, say, 14 million, or actually in the surrounding 16 million people, less so, there's less of those available. So there are some benefits. Fundamentally though, it depends on your business type. So if you're a service business, Ho Chi Minh City is probably just as easy. It's less complicated. If there's a manufacturer, it's where's your staff going to be? Where's the expertise? And work backwards from that. But find, if you're manufacturing an industrial zone, if you're exporting an export zone, if you're exporting with using imported materials predominantly, if it's a service business, obviously if it's retail, pick to where your customers are and use that as your base. You've got a bit of flexibility there.
Okay, Vinod, Indonesia has many islands. Are there different policies to attract investment?
Oh yeah, there are government policies in terms of triggering sectors or growth sectors in various growth. We have a growth plan for each sort of province, but obviously that now each province, I think probably same as maybe China, each province has a different minimum wage, and that's been it's going to be sort of dependent on the situation on the ground in terms of the governance reviews. But now with the omnibus law, I think that's going to be relaxed slightly in terms of implementation. It used to be a forced implementation, but now it's going to be a bit more relaxed in terms of how to implement that. And what we have found in the past is that the infrastructure and the availability of resources governs where you want to set up. So I would strictly advise our clients who are looking at Indonesia in terms of an investment destination to look at the infrastructure, because of course infrastructure can be a pain, especially where if you're exporting export oriented and you need access to the ports. Your typical industrial zones like Bekasi and Surabaya and a few others, of course access to natural resources and so forth, that is going to be playing a huge part because of the shortfall in infrastructure. So getting the stuff in, the materials into the factory and getting it out to the export-oriented ports and airports is something to consider. So you have your usual suspects in terms of industrial zones, but of course Batam is also a free trade zone. So there are clusters of free trade zone as well, depending on what you're going to do. But yeah, I think the biggest issue here is the minimum wage in terms of choice of location, as well as your infrastructure, depending on the industry you're working with.
Okay, thank you, Vinod. As for China, China's been pushing the export zones, the development zones quite a bit. It probably went that far that the government made it very clear that there is no special tax treatment within China. So China is one country, one tax system, but slowly, unofficially, there's quite some pulling left and right, of course, by various cities and zones to offer some of these benefits. None of them are set in stone. But if you are looking to incorporate a factory, for example, then shopping around does certainly make sense. Even if you're incorporating in a city, if you're in the service industry, it still makes sense to look for a district that may offer some benefits. Although I do always say that it's more important to have a flexible government rather than a government that helps you to save some taxes, because China can be quite a bureaucracy from time to time. Okay, that brings me to the end of this seminar. Thank you all participants for listening. We hope it's very informative. Acclime will host or will try to host monthly seminars on different topics. So stay tuned and subscribe to our LinkedIn or our newsletter to find out more. Please do reach out to my partners Matthew or Vinod or myself, of course for our own markets, but also for the markets that we serve as a whole group. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Vinod.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.